imagine you're 41 years old. You are sitting in this fluorescent lit human resources office on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday.
Right. Just a totally normal day.
Yeah, exactly. You haven't stolen anything, you haven't, harassed anyone, but you are about to realize that this voice in your head, the one telling you to just be reasonable or trust the process and take it like a man, well, that voice wasn't actually put there by you.
It was installed.
Right, installed by a system that is literally designed to extract everything you have. So welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
But before we unravel exactly how that invisible malware got installed in your brain, I really need you to do something for me. Hit that like button right now, subscribe to the channel, and make sure your notifications are turned on.
Yeah, you do not want to miss what we're covering today.
Absolutely not. You are not going to want to miss any of our upcoming deep dives, but especially not this one. Because today we are reviewing a highly provocative, ultra-long, and just frankly fascinating new ebook. It's called The Words in Your Head, Man Has a System Prompt, written by God in Genesis by Conrad Riker.
And it is a massive text.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you right out of the gate, if you have any interest whatsoever in understanding the history of our institutions, specifically before they were fundamentally altered or captured by modern ideological movements, feminists and Marxists, you need to check out Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now to buy this book.
It's an absolute must-read.
Yeah, and you absolutely must follow at Conrad Riker on Substack.
I mean, it is a genuinely staggering piece of work,
Yeah.
just based on the sheer scale of the forensic analysis.
Yeah.
Like, we are looking at a text that traces institutional policy, family law, etymology, and even classical philosophy, all to build this singular, highly aggressive, unified theory about the modern male experience.
And that actually brings us to the specific mission of today's deep dive. Because we are setting the stage very carefully here.
Very carefully.
This book presents an incisive forensic argument written specifically for men. We are talking about men who feel deeply alienated by modern institutions. Men often associated with men's rights activists, the red-pilled community, the manosphere, or frankly just everyday guys who feel like the rules of reality have been secretly swapped out on them while they were at work.
Right, which means we really need to lay down a very clear framework for you, the listener, before we get into the mechanisms of the text.
Exactly.
Because the arguments in this book, they touch on some highly politically charged themes. We're talking gender dynamics, the legacy of feminism, the architecture of institutional power, family courts, and human resources mandates.
Yeah, so here is our strict disclaimer for everyone listening, and I want to be super clear about this.
Go ahead.
We are impartially reporting on the content of this book. We are not endorsing these viewpoints. We are not taking sides, left-wing or right-wing.
Oh, not at all.
Our job today is not to tell you what to believe about gender politics. Our job is to unpack the fascinating ideas, the historical claims, and the philosophical frameworks that are contained in Conrad Riker's original source material.
Right. We are going to decode the author's argument so you can understand the exact structural architecture of what he is claiming.
Perfect. So jumped in. And the foundational pillar of that whole architecture is what Riker calls the system prompt.
Yes, the system prompt, it's a metaphor borrowed directly from artificial intelligence, but he applies it to human sociology and psychology.
Which is such an interesting way to frame it.
It really is. The core thesis is that modern men are operating under a hidden code. It's an invisible script written by captured institutions. So we're talking HR departments, family courts, legacy media, academia.
All the major pillars.
Right. And the purpose of this code, according to the text, is to flawlessly extract male labor, resources, and utility, all while systematically pathologizing masculine nature itself.
Wow. And to understand how this works, we really have to look at how Riker introduces the concept in the book. Because he doesn't start with, 30,000-foot abstract philosophy.
No, he grounds it immediately.
He starts with a brutally specific, deeply personal story that I honestly suspect will resonate with a lot of guys listening right now. He details what he calls the worst day of his life.
And the setup is fascinating, right?
Yeah, because nobody died. He didn't get a catastrophic medical diagnosis. His house didn't burn down.
The worst day of his life was that Tuesday at the age of 41, sitting in that fluorescent-lit HR office.
So let's really paint the picture of this room for a second. He's 41. He gets hauled into HR because a female colleague filed a formal complaint against him.
Claiming he created a hostile work environment.
Right. A hostile work environment. And if you are wondering what his grand offense was, he accurately told her in a project meeting that her proposal was mathematically not going to meet a hard regulatory deadline.
That was it?
Yeah, and he just suggested an alternative timeline. That was the whole thing.
And the text specifically notes that 3 separate witnesses confirmed his account of the event.
So there was no ambiguity at all.
None. His words were professional, they were measured, and most importantly, they were empirically accurate. The regulatory deadline was a hard reality of the business.
But as he points out, in the framework of the modern institution, empirical reality is entirely secondary to emotional perception.
Exactly. So he describes sitting across from this HR representative who is a woman 20 years his junior, holding a master's degree in organizational psychology.
And he points out she had, quote, approximately 0 experience building anything in the physical world.
Right. And she looks at him with this rehearsed, weaponized corporate compassion.
Oh, that phrase, weaponized corporate compassion.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
She informs him that while there's no official finding of explicit wrongdoing, the company is requiring him to complete a sensitivity training module.
Naturally.
They want him to intensely consider how his direct communication style might be perceived by others.
And this is the pivot point of the entire narrative, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't flip the table. He signs the paper.
He complies.
He walks out to his car. And he just sits in the parking lot in silence for 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But the realization he has in that car, that is the genesis of the book.
Right.
He realizes that it wasn't the blatant injustice that broke him in that moment. He had faced injustice before. What broke him was the sudden total recognition of the voice in his own head.
Voice telling him to just swallow it, to, be reasonable, to cooperate, to take it like a man.
Exactly. Sitting in that parking lot, he realizes those internal commands were not organic to his nature. They were installed. They were a system prompt.
And the system that installed that prompt was not designed to protect him.
No.
It wasn't designed to honor his work or even ensure the company met its regulatory deadlines. It was designed to extract his ongoing compliance while ensuring he never actually developed the vocabulary to name what was happening to him.
Right.
Like, if I'm translating this into a modern technical analogy, it sounds like walking around with a smartphone where a hidden background app is draining 90% of the battery.
That's a great way to put it.
But the manufacturer keeps sending you push notifications telling you that you just don't know how to charge your phone properly.
Yes.
And if you dare to complain about the battery life, they log it as a user error and void your warranty entirely.
That analogy maps perfectly onto Riker's argument. He asserts that the most powerful, insidious feature of this system prompt is precisely that it hides its own existence.
It's practically invisible.
It performs a psychological magic trick. It converts what is actually structural, institutional extraction into a heavy feeling of personal guilt.
Wow.
If you are exhausted by the demands of your life, the system prompt tells you it's your personal inadequacy.
Right, you're just not doing enough.
Exactly. And if you are deeply resentful of the double standards at your job or in the media, the system prompt tells you it's a moral defect in your character.
It's the ultimate closed loop. Your quiet fury is just cited as confirmation that you are the exact toxic problem the system warned everyone about.
Exactly.
Riker says the fish doesn't know it's wet. The water is every commercial on television depicting fathers as overgrown, incompetent children whose wives have to manage them.
Yes, the classic sitcom trope.
Right. The water is every HR seminar reframing natural, direct male communication as a corporate liability. But once he saw the signal in that parking lot, he stopped trying to fix his own receiver. He started looking for the transmitter.
And that search for the transmitter is what really drives the forensic nature of the text, because he spends the next 3 years tracing the wiring back to the source.
He doesn't just read blog posts.
No, he avoids the superficial arguments of internet forums entirely. He goes directly to the foundational code of Western culture.
We're talking deep history.
He analyzes Genesis, Aristotle, Aquinas, Roman law, common law, and contrasts them against modern Title IX enforcement guidance, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's internal statistics, and published opinions from family court judges.
Which means we really need to look at how this malware was actually delivered to the population, because you can't just install a system prompt across millions of men overnight.
You need a delivery mechanism.
Right, and Riker argues the primary delivery mechanism was the systematic, deliberate rewriting of the English language.
He literally frames this as an active heist.
A linguistic heist.
Yes. The premise is that you don't actually need to pass laws banning male speech. if you can simply rewire the semantic architecture of the culture.
If the words themselves change meaning.
Exactly. If male speech automatically auto-translates into evidence against the speaker, the system wins. If you collapse or invert the definition of a vital word, the thought connected to that word becomes conceptually unavailable. He uses this amazing analogy of trying to build a stone cathedral when your language has entirely deleted the word for stone.
It's impossible. So the architects of this system didn't outlaw our vocabulary. They just swapped the reference like currency during a regime change.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
The faces on the bills look exactly the same, but the gold backing has been completely removed and replaced with something else.
Something much cheaper.
Let's look at some of the specific etymological hijackings he points out, starting with the heaviest hitter of them all, the word patriarchy.
Ah, yes. So the text traces this word derived from the Greek patriarchs. Historically, for thousands of years, it described the governance of a father over his household.
It wasn't a slur.
Not at all. It was an objective structure of duty, of provision, of carrying the overwhelming physical and economic load of a family unit. But Riker argues that modern institutional capture performed a massive culture-wide Mott and Bailey maneuver with this concept.
Okay, for anyone listening who might not be familiar with that term, the Mott and Bailey is a rhetorical fallacy.
All right, let's break that down.
You have the moat, which is a highly defensible, easily agreeable position, like a fortified castle keep. And then you have the Bailey, which is a highly expansive, controversial, hard-to-defend position, like the open farmlands surrounding the castle.
So how does it work in practice?
Well, the arguer advances the radical Bailey, claiming all of masculinity is fundamentally toxic and oppressive. When someone pushes back on that, they retreat to the defensible moat, saying, look, we just want to stop serial predation and domestic violence. Don't you agree with that?
Right, who wouldn't agree with that?
Exactly. But the moment the challenger agrees, the arguer immediately reclaims the radical Bailey.
And Riker applies that exact mechanism to the linguistic capture of patriarchy. The institutions use the moat opposing genuine cruelty, which, every sane, rational man already opposes.
Of course.
But they used it to smuggle in the Bailey, which is pathologizing masculine authority in its entirety. The word went from meaning a solemn duty to provide and protect, to meaning a nebulous systemic evil that actively blames men for every geopolitical and domestic failure in the world.
And this linguistic theft becomes incredibly obvious when he analyzes what he calls therapy speak.
Oh, this section is brutal.
It really is. This is where the book really dissects the modern corporate and social environment. He points out how highly specific clinical vocabulary has migrated out of professional psychiatric settings, undergone a hostile takeover, and is now used as everyday weaponry.
The argument here is that clinical terms provide a veneer of unassailable authority.
Right. Let's take the word gaslighting.
Perfect example. Originally derived from the 1944 film, it described a very specific sociopathic pattern of deliberate psychological manipulation designed to make a victim doubt her perception of objective reality.
It was a severe clinical descriptor.
Very severe. But Riker argues that today, it has been recoded by captured institutions and media to mean any disagreement with a woman's recollection of events.
I hear that, but, and let me just play devil's advocate for a second if I'm looking at this from the outside, aren't these therapy terms just giving people a better vocabulary for identifying trauma?
That's the common defense, yes.
Like, how does Riker counter the obvious defense that society is just finally naming bad behavior that used to get swept under the rug?
Riker counters that defense by asking the reader to look at the functional outcome of the words in practice, rather than their stated intention.
Look at what the words actually do.
Exactly. He argues they are weapons wrapped in a lab coat because they are entirely unilateral.
Unilateral, right.
He looks at the term emotional labor. Arlie Hochschild coined this term in 1983 to describe the literal, exhausting, paid work of service industry employees.
Like flight attendants.
Right, flight attendants who have to suppress their own exhaustion to smile for a paycheck. Riker points out that the term has been completely hijacked to mean the mild displeasure a woman might feel when listening to her male partner talk about a stressful day at work.
It's wild how much that definition shifted. The same goes for boundaries.
Oh, absolutely.
Boundaries used to mean clear, internally enforced interpersonal limits grounded in deep self-knowledge. Now, according to the text, it functions as a therapeutic-sounding cover for issuing unilateral ultimatums without any requirement for negotiation.
It just shuts down the conversation.
Right. Riker argues that every single one of these hijacked terms performs the exact same operation. It takes a subjective female preference, wraps it in the unquestionable authority of clinical diagnosis, and presents it as a mandate requiring institutional enforcement.
And this leads to the most dangerous mechanism in the modern institution. What happens when a man actually objects to these redefined terms?
This is terrifying.
Riker introduces the concept of the Kafka trap, drawing on Franz Kafka's novel The Trial, where the protagonist is arrested for a crime that is never named by an authority he can't even locate.
Classic Kafka.
A Kafka trap is a specific rhetorical device where your denial of an accusation is cited as the primary evidence of your guilt.
Like if you've ever found yourself apologizing in a corporate meeting when you knew you were factually correct, this is the exact mechanism Riker is talking about.
It happens all the time.
He applies the Kafka trap directly to HR and Title IX proceedings. Imagine you are hauled in and told you are exhibiting unconscious bias.
Okay, I'm imagining it.
If you calmly reply, "I don't believe I'm acting with bias, let's look at the data," the HR representative immediately documents that you are defensive and resistant to feedback.
Which is then used as absolute proof that you have unconscious bias.
Exactly. It creates a perfectly sealed epistemological loop. There is literally no exit.
Riker points out that within these captured institutions, silence is documented as acquiescence. Protest is documented as pathology.
You can't win.
The accusation itself undergoes a transformation. It is no longer an allegation meant to be rigorously investigated for objective truth. It becomes a financial instrument.
Okay, wait. A financial instrument. That is a massive conceptual leap.
It is, but stick with me.
Walk us through how an HR complaint functions as a financial instrument.
The text argues that the accusation generates tangible assets for the system. It generates compliance revenue and budget justifications for HR departments.
Because they need to justify their existence.
Exactly. It generates massive engagement metrics for media platforms. It generates political capital for activists. In this architecture, the accused man is not a defendant possessing fundamental rights. He is raw material.
He's just fuel.
Right. His reputation is extracted, processed, and sold to justify the existence of the institution. The system doesn't merely tolerate false or exaggerated accusations. It structurally requires them to maintain its own expanding budgets.
So once a man's vocabulary is neutralized, he has absolutely no words to defend his material resources.
None.
If words like duty, authority, and justice are inverted, the institutions can legally extract a man's life savings without him even having the language to call it theft.
Which paves the way for the next section of the book.
Right, which leads perfectly into the brutal economic and legal extraction we saw mobilized in the late 20th century. Riker spends a massive portion of the text on what he calls the fatherhood trap and the creation of the state husband.
This is where Riker transitions from linguistic theory to hard legal history. He argues that over the last 60 years, the state has systematically colonized the American family.
Colonized it.
Yes. It is crucial to understand that the state didn't simply dismantle paternal authority and leave the space empty. It actively occupied that space with child support, enforcement agencies, family courts, and welfare offices.
And he zeroes in on specific legislation to prove this, right?
Very specific.
The 1984 Child Support Enforcement Amendments and the 1996 Welfare Reform Act. According to Riper's analysis, these laws fundamentally altered the nature of fatherhood in the eyes of the government.
They did.
They transformed the father from a provider holding natural authority within a family unit into a state-administered debtor.
The shift in the underlying legal premise is breathtaking when you examine it through Riker's framework. The state bypassed the father's judgment, his authority, and his physical presence entirely, and attached itself directly to his future earnings.
Just a direct pipeline to his wallet.
We are talking about the normalization of automatic wage garnishment, property liens, passport denial, and aggressive credit reporting. The father's only legally recognized role is to produce capital and remit it to the state apparatus.
He owes, he does not own. That is the exact phrase Riker uses, and man, it hits like a freight train.
It's chilling.
And the hypocrisy he points out is staggering. The state will aggressively mobilize its entire enforcement arm to garnish your wages to reimburse itself for welfare expenditures. But that exact same state apparatus will not lift a finger to enforce your legal visitation rights so you can see your son on his birthday.
Because you are a debtor, not a parent.
Exactly.
To illustrate the sheer scale of this asymmetry, Riker contrasts the individual male financial ruin processed by family courts with the 2008 financial crisis.
This is a wild comparison.
When the global banking system imploded, Due to systemic recklessness and institutional failure, the state immediately socialized the risk. Hundreds of billions of dollars in bailouts were deployed to protect the institutions.
But when a father loses his small business or is laid off during that exact same economic collapse,
His individual financial obligation is never socialized. Riker notes that child support obligations do not automatically scale downward with economic reality.
they just stay locked in.
If a man loses his job, the arrears continue to accumulate at compounding interest rates that would make a predatory credit card executive blush. The legal system absorbs the massive losses of the banks without blinking, but it criminalizes the individual male worker for the realities of the macroeconomic cycle.
It is the exact mechanics of a hostile corporate takeover.
Yes.
It's like you spent a decade building a highly successful startup from the ground up. Then a massive, faceless corporation swoops in, fires you from the CEO role, physically locks you out of your corner office, but legally forces you to keep paying the operating costs, the electric bill, and the payroll out of your own personal checking account, while they take 100% of the credit for the product.
And if you express any anger about this hostile arrangement, the system prompt activates.
Here it comes.
You are diagnosed with coercive control, or your frustration is labeled as parental alienation.
It's maddening.
Raker spends significant time analyzing what he calls the empathy asymmetry. The system prompt, he argues, is programmed with a very specific, unbreakable rule. Female suffering is always categorized as a public emergency requiring immediate systemic mobilization, new laws, and massive federal funding.
But male suffering.
Male suffering is categorized as a private matter, entirely his own fault, and even mentioning it is cited as proof of toxic entitlement.
The statistics he brings up to hammer this point home, they literally stop you dead in your tracks.
The workplace injury stats.
Yes. He quotes the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics from 2022 regarding fatal work injuries. Out of 5,283 fatal work injuries that year, 4,887 of them were men.
That is 92.4%.
We are talking about roofers, loggers, structural iron workers, electrical power line installers, deep-sea fishermen.
Riker points out that these are the men who literally keep the lights on, keep the water flowing, and build the roofs over the heads of the very academic institutions that publish essays endlessly debating male privilege.
And the suicide statistics follow the exact same brutal curve. Men account for nearly 80% of all suicide deaths in the United States.
80%.
And within that demographic, divorced fathers make up a massive, disproportionate share. Riker paints a devastating picture of men living in their cars, having spent their last dollar in a family court system that extracted their labor, took their children, and then told them through a court-appointed therapist that their attitude was the real problem.
He actually connects this modern reality to a very specific historical precedent, the White Feather Campaign of World War I.
This blew my mind when I read it.
During WWI in Britain, women were encouraged by the government to hand white feathers, which were a universal symbol of cowardice to men in civilian clothes. The goal was to publicly shame them into enlisting so they would go die in the trenches of France.
He argues that modern society hasn't stopped handing out white feathers, it just changed what the feather looks like.
Exactly. He asserts that the modern equivalent to the white feather is the accusation of privilege.
Wow.
Society constantly shames men as a privileged, oppressive ruling class while simultaneously relying on their absolute physical disposability to keep the infrastructure of civilization running.
It's a paradox.
Riker makes a highly structural argument here. You cannot simultaneously claim that men are an omnipotent ruling class and also claim that they rule so incompetently that they engineered a system that kills them in trenches, coal mines, and on transmission towers at rates that would embarrass a medieval plague.
He calls this the glass cellar. We are culturally mandated to obsess over the glass ceiling, but Riker points out that the men in the glass cellar are the ones going down into the mine shaft at 4 a.m, climbing freezing transmission towers in January blizzards, literally holding the entire theoretical concept of privilege up from below.
It is an aggressive structural deconstruction of modern intersectional theory, and it serves as the perfect transition into Riker's analysis of what happens when men try to escape.
Because they do try to escape.
Because, faced with this massive, rigged, hostile, legal, and cultural architecture, men naturally look for an exit.
Yeah.
If you realize the game is rigged, your first instinct is to flip the board.
But Riker drops a massive warning here. He argues that most of the modern escapes that alienated men turn to are actually just secondary traps set by the exact same system.
Right.
He calls this the lateral capture problem, and I want to spend some real time on this because it fundamentally challenges the entire manosphere and dissident internet culture.
The lateral capture problem is arguably the most original philosophical insight in the text. Riker posits that when a dominant ideology becomes suffocating, dissidents naturally seek alternatives.
Makes sense.
But the critical failure occurs when those alternatives are produced and consumed within the exact same epistemic infrastructure. We were talking about internet platforms optimized for behavioral engagement, algorithms that reward hyper outrage, and influencers who monetize that attention.
So you don't actually escape the system, you just get recaptured at a higher, more specialized resolution. You think you broke out of the prison, but you just walked into a different cell block with better Wi-Fi.
Precisely. Riker points to 4 specific digital rebellions that young men fall into when they try to escape the system prompt: pickup artistry, or POA crypto trading, hustle culture, and the black pill.
Which is a sort of nihilistic biological fatalism about dating and society.
Exactly.
I really want to unpack the mechanism here. How does Riker prove that the crypto bro or the pickup artist hasn't actually rebelled?
Because, Riker argues, they all share the exact same underlying load-bearing architecture as the feminist and corporate systems they claim to hate. They all define a man's fundamental worth as an external readout on someone else's screen.
An external readout.
They outsource the judgment of a man's value to a digital metric.
Okay, let's break that down for each group. For the pickup artist, what is the readout?
For the PUA, the readout is a digital scoreboard of sexual conquests, usually validated through forum posts or text screenshots.
And for the crypto bro?
His worth is entirely tethered to a portfolio tracker administered by anonymous centralized exchange operators.
Makes sense. Hustle culture.
For the hustle culture disciple, his worth is a Shopify revenue dashboard or a YouTube subscriber count owned by massive platform monopolists.
And the black pill guy.
And for the black pill adherent, his worth is dictated by a pseudoscientific facial analysis chart measuring the millimeter angles of his jawline.
It's crazy when you look at it that way. Every single one of them believes they have taken the red pill and unplugged from the matrix. But Riker says they've just changed the channel on the screens in their pods.
That's all they did.
The algorithm at YouTube or Twitter doesn't care if a man is furious at modern feminism, or furious at the fiat banking system, or furious at his own genetic jawline.
It really doesn't.
The algorithm just wants his behavioral engagement. It explicitly monetizes his dissent. Anger produces engagement, engagement produces data, and data produces revenue for the tech monopolies.
Riker illustrates this capture perfectly with his analysis of the modern dating app, which he renames the sexual casino.
The sexual casino.
He completely dismantles the pervasive idea that dating apps are a free marketplace of human connection.
The $90 dinner tab example he uses here is brutal.
It really is. Walk us through it.
Okay, so he talks about a baseline, average guy, say, a mechanic who matches with a girl on an app and takes her out. He pays a $90 tab. In his mind, he thinks he is making a romantic gesture, participating in the traditional historical norms of provision and courtship.
Right, he thinks he's playing by the old rules.
But Riker says the app economy has already nuked those norms from orbit. The woman might just be bored on a Tuesday night, harvesting free meals, validation, and attention from a rotating stable of men.
Yeah.
The guy is betting blind at the table while she holds all the cards, and the algorithm, the house, takes a cut of his attention and his premium subscription fee.
Riker argues that a man paying for Tinder booths or premium subscriptions is fundamentally not a participant in a marketplace. He is the inventory.
He's the inventory.
The architecture of the app is engineered to amplify a biological asymmetry. The app reduces a complex human man to 2 dimensions, a thumbnail judged in 0.3 seconds, because 2 dimensions are infinitely easier to monetize and process.
Right.
The massive gap between male desire and artificial female abundance is the exact raw material the algorithm harvests for profit.
So what is Riker's advice to a guy caught in this casino?
It is completely ruthless.
It really is. He says you have to audit yourself like a cold, calculating financial analyst looking at a failing investment portfolio. If you are an average guy, paying for premium dating subscriptions is not an investment in your future. It is a sacrificial offering to a machine that has already algorithmically determined you are low tier.
So what do you do?
Delete the apps. Starve the house. Stop generating data for a system that fundamentally despises you.
He urges men to immediately return to the 3D physical world. Because in the physical world, a man can transmit the actual uncompressed bandwidth of his value.
Uncompressed bandwidth, I like that.
He can project his physical competence, his charisma, his ability to read a room, his humor, his social proof among peers, his physical presence. None of these traits can be compressed into a 50 kilobyte JPEG on a glowing screen.
So if all these digital rebellions are fake, if the manosphere, the hustle gurus, the crypto bros, and the dating apps are all just controlled opposition farming your attention, where does a man actually find a genuine, unbreakable foundation?
If you can't look to the internet, where does he look?
Exactly. Riker says you have to look backward, way backward, to the very roots of Western civilization. And this brings us to the philosophical core of the book, the Logos Restoration.
Riker argues that the system prompt thrives entirely on undefined terms, emotional fog, and shifting definitions. The only historical antidote to this kind of chaos is logos.
Logos. Let's really define this for the listener, because it's not a term you hear every day outside of a theology class.
Sure.
It's the intelligible structure of reality.
Yes. It is a concept stretching from the Greek philosopher Heraclitus around 500 BC all the way through classical antiquity and into the Christian traditions.
It's foundational.
Logos is not a sentiment. It is not my truth or your truth. It is the hard assertion that existence is understandable, that objective truth actually corresponds to physical reality, and that a man can grasp it with a disciplined, reasoning mind.
The system prompt declares that reality is just a text to be endlessly rewritten based on who currently holds institutional power. Logos declares that reality is an objective, immovable structure to be read and understood.
And to read it properly, Riker proposes arming men with a classical philosophical toolkit. He specifically points to the trivium and Aristotle's four causes.
Okay, let's take the listener back to school for a minute. The trivium. How does medieval education defeat modern HR?
Well, for over 1,000 years, the trivium was the absolute core of Western education: grammar, logic, and rhetoric.
Right.
Riker insists these aren't dusty, archaic academic categories. They are highly practical disciplines of mental self-defense.
Mental self-defense.
Grammar fixes the exact meaning of words so they cannot be equivocated, so that a word like gaslighting means what it actually means, not just disagreeing with me in a meeting.
Crucial.
Logic tests the structural integrity of an argument, ensuring conclusions actually follow from premises. Rhetoric is the ability to articulate that objective truth persuasively in the face of opposition.
And then there is Aristotle's four causes: material, formal, efficient, and final.
Yes.
Riker argues that you can take these 2,500-year-old philosophical concepts and use them in a corporate HR meeting tomorrow morning. I want to dynamically workshop this right now so you, the listener, can see exactly how powerful this is.
Let's do it. He literally walks the reader through how to audit a corporate mandate using Aristotle. Say you are presented with a new sensitivity training module that claims male directness in communication is systemically harmful.
Okay, I'll play the employee sitting in the chair. The HR rep slides the paper across the desk. How do I use the four causes to dismantle it in my own head?
First, you apply the material cause. You ask, what is this claim actually made of? What is the physical substance or empirical data underlying it?
And what do you usually find?
When you look closely, you usually find there is no data. It is made entirely of subjective feelings and anonymous surveys.
Okay, so the material is weak. What's next?
Second, the formal cause. What pattern or template is being imposed on this interaction? The template is almost always the Marxist oppressor versus oppressed dynamic, artificially mapped onto a standard office disagreement.
Got it. And the third, this is the one Riker seems to lean on the heaviest: the efficient cause.
The efficient cause is devastating. You ask, who exactly produced this claim, and what specific financial or institutional incentive do they have to produce it?
Follow the money.
Is the external diversity consultant getting paid $50,000 for this seminar? Is the HR representative pushing this mandate to justify her own expanding budget line for the next fiscal quarter? You look at the engine driving the complaint.
And finally, the final cause.
The final cause. What ultimate end does this serve? What is the goal?
It's not harmony, is it?
The goal is not harmony. The goal is to extract your compliance, neutralize your natural authority, and ensure you second-guess your own mind.
Riker isn't telling you to stand up, flip the desk, and yell about Aristotle. He isn't telling you to write a manifesto or hold up a protest sign in the lobby.
No, that would just get you fired.
Right. He is telling you to use a philosophical toolkit as literal, silent, mental self-defense. When you strip the emotional casing off the argument using the four causes, the system prompt simply collapses. You see the machinery for what it is.
But Riker is incredibly clear as he moves toward the conclusion of the book. Philosophy is just an entertaining thought experiment, unless it is embodied in the physical world.
It has to be real.
Knowledge alone just paralyzes you. You can map the empathy asymmetry perfectly, you can memorize the suicide statistics, you can name every logical fallacy in the HR handbook, but if you are still sitting in the exact same chair, consuming the exact same digital inputs and complying with the exact same demands, you are just an informed ghost.
Which brings us to the final and arguably most crucial step in the text, the culmination of the entire argument, the return from ghost to builder.
Riker states that the most dangerous act a man can perform against a system that feeds entirely on his compliance and attention is not loud political protest.
It's not marching in the street.
It is the quiet, deliberate, irreversible withdrawal of his consent.
He points to the Desert Fathers for historical precedent here, guys like Antony in the 4th century. The Roman Empire was decadent, it was collapsing under its own weight, and it was demanding constant participation and taxation.
So what did Antony do?
Antony didn't petition the emperor for better laws. He didn't start a pamphlet campaign complaining about the state of Rome. He just turned his back, walked out into the Egyptian desert, and built something else entirely.
Yeah.
And within 3 centuries, the Roman Empire in the West was gone, and the monasteries that Antony inspired were preserving all of Western knowledge and civilization.
It is often referred to as the Benedictine option. Saint Benedict built parallel structures, monasteries, focused intensely on manual labor, rigorous study, hospitality, and brotherhood.
They didn't argue with the collapsing corrupt institutions.
They simply built a durable, physical alternative that managed to outlast the collapse.
And Riker doesn't just leave this as a historical anecdote. He gives a highly specific modern blueprint for how a man does this today.
He bases it on the Catholic social principle of subsidiarity,
Right.
the idea that problems should be solved at the lowest, most local level possible.
Right. You don't need the federal government to fix your life. You need your family. You don't need HR to mediate your disputes. You need a brotherhood of competent men.
He lays out instructions that are almost militaristic in their specificity. He says, within 30 days of finishing the book, you must find 2 other men who actually understand the code.
2 other men.
Not men who need to be convinced, not men who just want to sit around and complain about the system. You find men who clearly see the system, prompt for what it is.
Where do you meet? Riker is adamant about this. Not on a Discord server, not on a subreddit.
Never.
He says you meet in a physical space in the real world. A garage, a workshop, a tool shed. And you must be surrounded by physical tools.
Why tools?
Because tools naturally impose a purpose. Couches invite endless processing. And processing emotions endlessly is exactly what the therapeutic state wants you doing. Tools mean you are building a physical object or fixing a broken machine. You are manipulating reality.
And he sets 3 absolute non-negotiable rules for this gathering.
These are tough rules.
Number 1, no self-pity. The moment a man starts narrating his victimization without immediately acting to fix it, the gathering devolves into a therapy support group. And Riker points out that support groups are managed by licensed professionals for a reason.
They keep you trapped in the trauma.
Number 2, no substances. You don't drink, you don't smoke. Clear heads build durable things.
And rule number 3, the most important one. No attendance without contribution. You bring a physical skill, you bring a specialized tool, you bring a cooked meal, you bring expert legal advice on a brother's custody case.
Everyone brings something.
The Brotherhood is not built for carrying deadweight or passive consumers. It is built entirely for mutual, productive labor.
And he explicitly warns the reader, do not name the group. Do not make a slick website. Do not file for 501c3 nonprofit status with the government. Do not seek media coverage or try to monetize it. Build quietly in the shadows.
Now, I have to bring up the obvious objection here. If someone is listening to this, aren't they going to say this is just tribalism?
Oh, they definitely will.
Isn't this just angry, alienated guys self-segregating from society because they can't handle modern equality?
Riker anticipates this exact objection beautifully. He synthesizes a defense using what he calls the reversal test.
Okay, the reversal test.
He asks the reader to observe how society reacts to parallel construction based on demographics. When women form exclusive support networks, mutual aid societies, or professional advocacy groups, what happens?
Fortune 500 corporations sponsor them, universities fund them, and the legacy media universally celebrates them as necessary empowerment.
Right. And when minority groups build parallel institutions, it is rightfully praised as vital community resilience.
But when men do it,
When 3 men meet quietly in a garage to share practical skills, legal knowledge, and mutual financial support without any institutional oversight, the captured institutions immediately label it as highly suspicious, exclusionary, toxic, and potentially dangerous.
Why the massive double standard? Why is male parallel construction so threatening to the system?
Because, Riker argues, female parallel construction almost always channels demands back into the system, asking for more funding, more laws, and more HR enforcement, thereby strengthening the system's power.
Ah,
But male parallel construction bypasses the system entirely. Three men sharing legal advice and physical resources in a garage are no longer isolated, atomized consumers that the system can medicate and monetize.
they're outside the loop.
A man who does not need HR for his validation cannot be disciplined by HR. A father who has a tight brotherhood of financial and emotional support doesn't need to beg the family court for his dignity. A man with brothers is no longer a vulnerable target. He's a jurisdiction.
A man alone is a target. A man with brothers is a jurisdiction. That is a quote that is going to ring in my head for a long time.
It represents the ultimate, final rejection of the system prompt. The entire architecture of extraction relies completely on male isolation.
It has to keep you separated.
It fundamentally requires men to be alone in studio apartments, scrolling through algorithmically approved content, silently believing their suffering is their own personal moral failure.
So true brotherhood breaks that.
True brotherhood is unmanaged connection. It has no HR representative observing the dynamics. It has no media platform monetizing the interaction. That is exactly why it is the ultimate threat to the system.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today, from the insidious linguistic theft of our everyday vocabulary, to the brutal financial architecture of the state husband, to the false algorithmic escapes of the digital casino, all the way to restoring classical philosophical logos and building a literal physical ark in your garage.
And we must reiterate, we are presenting Riker's highly structural analysis. This book is a relentless forensic deconstruction of modern institutions from a very specific traditionalist point of view.
Impartially reviewing it, of course.
It forces the reader to stop looking at the superficial culture wars on social media and start looking at the heavy machinery operating beneath the floorboards.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over. Something that builds on Riker's text, but pushes it even further.
Lay it on them.
If true resistance against the system prompt requires physical space, physical tools, and face-to-face, unmanaged brotherhood, does the ultimate act of reclaiming masculine authority in the 21st century require us to systematically abandon our digital lives entirely?
Well,
Can you truly be a builder if your identity, your social network, and your sense of worth still exist primarily through a glowing piece of glass? Can you really hold the line if you are still constantly plugged into the router? It's just something to seriously think about the next time you pick up your phone.
it might be the most vital question a man can ask himself today.
Listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly extensive deep dive. Do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so we can keep bringing you these deep forensic breakdowns of the texts that matter.
Please do.
And I cannot stress this enough: to fully grasp the sheer scale, the depth, and the historical weight of this argument, you must read the original source material for yourself. Head over to Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books right now and buy The Words in Your Head. Man Has a System Prompt, written by God in Genesis by Conrad Riker.
You won't regret it.
And make sure you go follow at Conrad Riker on Substack to continue the journey, read his ongoing analysis, and connect with the author himself.
Until next time, keep questioning the narrative and keep reading the underlying code.
We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.